I'd now like to welcome to Talking Sports former Yankee playoff hero Jim Leyritz. Jim, welcome to Sports Talk with John Bird Crow. How you doing?
Hey, John. How we doing today?
Doing great, man. How about yourself?
I'm doing all right. I'm actually on my way to the airport, heading to New York to go catch Game 3 of this upcoming series that has now turned into a very interesting one.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. I want to go back to the first two games of the series, and everybody's talking about it. The issue last night in the top of the seventh, Buck Showalter walks Robinson Cano, which is the go-ahead run to face Nick Swisher. We all know the failings of not only Swisher, but A-Rod and Teixeira. Put yourselves in Joe Girardi's mind. You played with Joe Girardi. He's been a good manager for the Yankees. What do you do in terms of moving that lineup around, if anything, to protect your best player, Robinson Cano?
Well, I think it's very obvious he's going to have to make a change in the lineup if he plans on keeping A-Rod in the lineup. Now, my question is, did Joe Girardi learn anything from Joe Torre back in 1996 when he had players like Wade Boggs and Tito Martinez who were struggling in the postseason, and he decided to play Charlie Hayes and Cecil Fielder, who were the guys that were hot at the time? You know, does he have those? Does he have the guts to do that? Does he have the guts to sit down A-Rod and play a Chavez or play somebody else at that position? Because A-Rod is obviously struggling as bad as he is, and you look at the stats, you look at everything else. I think it's the last 70 at bats in playoffs and World Series that A-Rod has not had a home run or anything like that. So, you got to start wondering, do you make that move? And I'm telling you, at this point, I think if it was Joe Torre's team, I think that move would be probably made.
Yeah, but Jim, the one thing I will say, and we're speaking with Jim Leyritz, former Yankee playoff hero, the one thing I will say about that, when Torre did that and he batted A-Rod eighth, and everybody remembers that in that Detroit series, and basically A-Rod even went into more of a shell and didn't do anything. I think I would agree with you. If you're going to make the move, you almost have to take him out of the lineup. I mean, to put him eighth when he's used to batting third and fourth in every other postseason but the one when Torre dropped him eighth, he's just going to go into further of a shell. You almost got to get him out of the lineup.
Well, that's what I'm saying. And I'm thinking that, he definitely is going to – if you were going to make the move to take him completely out, you tell him, hey, listen, just like Torre told Boggs and Tino, hey, listen, I'm going to go with this tonight. It doesn't mean that you're not going to be used. Doesn't mean that I may not need you. But this is the way we're going, and you know what? We'll deal with tomorrow when tomorrow comes. And, whether or not Joe feels like he can do that, we'll find out. I mean, that's going to be – it's a big move. At the same time, like I said, I agree with you. If you just drop him in the lineup, he may just be, doing more damage than you would be if you just take him out completely. So it's going to be a tough thing for Joe Girardi to decide.
One more on this, Jim. Go back to 1996. You brought up the guys that Joe Torre benched, and I'm going to go to the bench. You bench Wade Boggs, you bring in Charlie Hayes. You bench Tino, you bring in Cecil Fielder. I don't think you have a Charlie Hayes or a Cecil Fielder on this team sitting on the bench. I know Chavez has had a nice year. I know Andrew Jones has had a nice first half of the year. Are those guys like Charlie Hayes and Cecil Fielder sitting on this bench?
Well, I think Chavez is. I think Chavez has proven, he's a former All-Star. He filled in very admirably for A-Rod most of the year. I feel like, as long as it's not a left-handed pitcher, the matchup with a right-hander is really, really good. And I think that's, I think for a game, possibly that this is maybe what would be a good move on part for everybody, and just give A-Rod a day off to say, okay, and maybe challenge him a little bit. Maybe that's what he needs. I'm sorry, but we're talking probably one of the best, 5 players in the game. If sitting out of the lineup for one night is going to ruin him, then he don't belong playing for the New York Yankees, a team that goes to the postseason every year. So sooner or later, they got to make that move.
Jim, go back to your career. You were with the Yankees from 90 to 96, and you were known as a guy that basically lit up in big spots. I know you can't get into A-Rod's mind, but just take me into your mind. You talk about 1995, the home run that people forget against Tim Belcher in the 15th inning. I don't want to talk about the other 3 games of that series, and we'll get into the 96 homer against Wohlers. But how were you able to react differently and basically seize the moment where other players don't seem to be able to do it?
Well, I think more so the way my career was, I think pretty much every game for me was the World Series. And if I didn't play good that day, I wasn't in the lineup the next day. So I think I was able to handle it a little bit differently. At the same time, it is what the moment. I mean, you're playing in New York, you're playing in the toughest city. To me, I can't explain it. I don't understand why guys struggle like that have the amount of talent that these guys have. And, it's just something you can't put your finger on. And, there's been times that it looks like he's going to get out of it, but all of a sudden, here we are now 70 at-bats into the postseason again, that he has not been able to hit a home run, has not been able to come through in the clutch, and we're sitting there talking about it again. Sooner or later, you have to make a move, and I think the move now is to actually sit him out and play Chavez the next game.
Sports Talk in Black and White. Listen to Jim Leyritz. Jim, everybody's favorite moment with you, 1996 Game 4. Yankees are down 6-0 and then 6-3 in the 8th. You get up against the Atlanta Brave closer, Mark Wohlers, and hit a slider to tie the game in the 8th inning. I was talking to a buddy of mine, and I told him I was having you on the show, real big baseball guy, I know he's listening. And he wanted me to ask you, when you got up there in that situation with Wohlers, who had given you some fastballs early, what were you looking for on that pitch that you eventually hit out? Because to me and to him, it seemed like you basically stepped out in front. You kept your hands back, but you put your foot out almost like you were waiting for something else to come. But your hands were, remained back, and you were able to jack it out. What were you looking for in that situation with Mark Wohlers?
Well, being a catcher, I pretty much, when he threw a slider away the pitch before, was, the next thing you would think of that you're going to come fastball in, especially a guy that's throwing 100 miles an hour. And so I was definitely looking fastball, and I was looking, middle in, and fortunately for me, he was able to hang a slider. He hung a slider, which actually sped up my bat a little bit. But like you said, I was a little bit out in front, and I was able to keep my hands back and drive the ball out. And, of course, playing in Atlanta, which was considered the Homer Dome at that time, the launching pad, I'm sorry, that's what it's called. The ball did carry, and I was able to go out and, turn the tide of that, to that game, and, of course, the series. And we were able to go on and win. And, of course, the next night, Andy Pettitte just pitched such a great game. We were able to go on and win. And, like you said, a lot of people consider that home run as the beginning of the dynasty.
Oh, definitely.
It was a moment, like I said, it was just one of those situations where, as a hitter, I'm just thinking, dead red fastball, but I adjusted to the slider, and fortunately, he hung it. Do
you notice, like in the pressure situation we talk about in football and basketball, where the game seems to slow down for great players? When you're in that moment, I mean, is that maybe what's happening with A-Rod? The game slows down for you, whereas him, he's got 9 million things thinking about, because everybody talks about he's ready to, saw the bat handle off in his hand. Does the game kind of slow down and you're relaxed when you're up there in those situations?
Yeah, I think for the players that are able to handle the pressure, that are used to coming through in the clutch, it's almost, you remind yourself, okay, take a deep breath here. You know what? Come down a little bit. And it's funny, I was listening, I think it was John Smoltz or Cal Ripken last night when they were doing the game, and they were talking about how, I think it actually was Cal that was talking about how when you're facing these hard-throwing relievers, these hard-throwing pitchers, the tendency for hitters is to speed up themselves, when actually it should be the opposite. It should be slowing things down and letting, Frank Howard used to be my hitting coach, and he always used to say, hey, Jumbo Jimmy, let that guy 60 feet, 6 inches elevate you, and put a good swing on it. And really that's kind of how you try to handle those big pressure situations, is try to take yourself out of the moment and just take that deep breath and say, okay, relax, and just put a good swing on something.
Sports Talking Black and White. I'm sorry, not Sports Talking Black and White. Talking sports with the Bird. It's 13 years, Jim. You got to excuse me, changing the shows. You mentioned Andy Pettitte, and that's a good segue before. And I wanted to talk to you about him. And I know they put his record up 19-10 in the postseason. He got the loss last night. But you were kind of his personal catcher for your 2 stints there. How important is that catcher relationship? Because we heard about, when Posada was catching, or really not catching, Randy Johnson, he had some issues. Talk about that relationship between pitcher and catcher, you and Andy, and just what makes Andy so tough in the postseason.
Well, I think it's the same thing. I think it's a confidence level that he has in himself, and able to take that moment and just slow things down and just, be able to concentrate. Andy, him and I had a special relationship. It was a situation where I used to joke with him and go out about the 7th or 8th inning and say, "Listen, shake me off a couple times just so they think you're thinking out here and I'm not doing all the thinking." But it was a great situation with him too, because he was such a good pitcher. He had 3 or 4 good pitches and had the confidence to throw all of them at any time. And I think that's a really important thing as a catcher, when you get to know your pitching staff as well as you're supposed to, is to know, okay, you're going to put the finger down that you want, but if you don't and they disagree and they shake, no, you should always know what the next pitch is going to be. And some guys get it and some guys don't. And I think that's something that early on in Posada's career, I remember, when I played for Texas, Fletcher Rodriguez in 1997 still had that problem and that little knack on him that he didn't work well with the pitchers when they shook. He didn't always think about what they were thinking. And I think that's a huge, important part. I remember talking to Tim McCarver about it, and that's why he had his personal relationship with Steve Carlton, is we knew exactly what this guy wanted to do if he decided that if we put something down, he didn't want that, we knew exactly where to go next. And I think that's a huge thing for catchers to know, but their pitching staffs.
Talking sports with the Bird here with Jim Leyritz, 1996 playoff hero. And Jim, I know I ran into you a couple weeks ago at the stadium, and I know this past April you signed a personal services contract with the Yankees. Want to try and find out a little bit, what's going on with the Yankees now, because as everyone knows, you're away for the team for a while. I'm going to go back to December in 2007. Everybody knows the story. You were out celebrating your birthday, and I'm not going to get into the particulars. Basically, you went through a yellow, she went through a red light. You guys were both, over the legal limit at the time, and a person lost their life. I know you were cleared of manslaughter, but I just want to go back to that part of your life. And there were reports that you were thinking about committing suicide. I just want to know, how low did you sink, and who helped you get out to the place you are today?
Well, most of all, it was a tragic situation. It was a situation where, because of the media hype and everything else that went up with it, unfortunately, I was wrongly accused in the beginning, and it took us 3 years to wait. And during those 3 years, I'd always been, a Christian guy, but not really a follower, of Christ and things like that. And really, during that 3 years, I grew closer to the church. And, honestly, it started in 2003 when I retired from the game and took custody of my kids. I started putting my priorities in my life a little bit better in order than I did when I was married and living the professional baseball life. But God was basically the point that turned me around. And once I made that total commitment to Him in 2003, when this accident happened in 2007, it was a tragic situation, very, very hard on both families that were dealing with it. At the same time, there was never a chance for me to ever take my life because, number one, I had 3 children that I had custody of that I was raising, and I had something that I wanted to show my children that, listen, I'm going to fight this thing, and I'm going to show you, despite what everybody else says or what other people are saying, is that I was, yes, drinking and driving that night, but I was not responsible for the accident or the death that was involved. And unfortunately, it was a situation that, like I said, it took a long time to go through the process. But God really blessed me through that time. He kept me home with my children and my kids during those 3 years to be able to be with them every day, to assure them that I would be there for them when it was all over with. And like I said, we were very, very fortunate that after 3 years and waiting that time, that the system did turn out. The jury found me innocent as far as causing the accident, but found me guilty of the DUI. And just a very valuable lesson to everybody that they can learn from that. That even if you just have one drink and you get behind the wheel of a car, that your life can change. And unfortunately, like you said, both of us drivers that night made a mistake. We should have never been drinking and driving. And unfortunately, she paid a very ultimate price, which was her life. And then I also paid a very high price as far as, the 3 years of going through trial. And then, of course, the last 2 years of trying to rebuild my life back to where it was going at the time. And, like I said, God was just a huge, important part of that. And to this day is who leads me and has got me through this time and been able to let me get back on my feet again, get back with the organization, do some work for them, and, of course, be out there speaking to kids, speaking to people about how, and trying to change other people's lives so they don't make those same mistakes and those tragic decisions that were made that night.
My last question, Jim, and I appreciate your honesty. Talk about, you had a reputation of being a cocky player. You twirled the bat. I just realized you got that from Mickey Rivers, who's one of my all-time favorite Yankees. But talk about the cocky player, Jim Leyritz, as a player, to what you have become now due to this, accident back in 2007 on your birthday, and now being reunited with the Yankees. Talk about how much more important these last 5 years of your life have been. Compare that to the home run in 1996 and the man you've become today.
Well, I think the biggest thing when you talk about that is it's not what our past has done; it's what our future holds. And I can tell you right now, I lived a great life. My baseball career, the moments that I had to be a part of everything that I had are second to none as far as every kid's dreams. But as far as actually living life wholesomely and really getting a lot out of it over the last 3 or 4 years, it's really changed for me, and it's given me an opportunity that I know that, yes, those moments a lot of fans remember, a lot of people, it changed their lives and their views. But what I've been able to do over the last 2 years, since everything has ended, to be able to talk to kids, to be able to change people's lives, and to be able to follow Christ like I have, my life is just beginning. And I think that's the most important thing that I try to tell people every day is that something tragic can happen in your life. I was just part of the 9/11 Cantor Fitzgerald charity event in New York just this past month. And, here is something so negative that happened that day that over the last 11 years we've turned it into a positive, and it's changed so many people's lives. And that's kind of what I feel like my life is right now, is an opportunity for me to take this tragic situation and to go out there and to change other people's lives so they don't go through these things. And I can't tell you how, I love the accolades that it came with the baseball. I love to be able to say that I was a major leaguer and lived my dream. At the same time, where my life is right now, I don't see it getting, it could have gotten any better because, now it's following the Lord and following Christ and being able to give back everything that was given to me.
All right, Jim Leyritz, World Series hero, and obviously making a bigger impression right now of what he's doing with the Yankees. Really appreciate your time and your honesty. I hope this turns out better the next 3 games. We could have you on maybe down the line. Tell us a little bit more about what you're doing. Thanks so much, Jim.
No, thank you for having me, and it's a pleasure talking to you.
Okay.